Welcome back, coworkers. It's Haz here, and I'm sure we're all tired and overworked during Big Run, but let's take a short break and talk about one of the more popular topics this weekend, and that's Griller and Glowfly waves. These waves are already pretty brutal for most players, and nothing is more frustrating than trying to increase your Golden Egg high score just to get a terrible night wave and ruin the whole shift. But the good news is that Glowflies and Grillers are not that bad on Wahoo World. Before we start, if you're interested in more guides, especially for Big Run, do check out the rest of the channel as it's full with Salmon run guides and tips. So as I said, Wahoo World is actually a pretty good map for both Grillers and Glowflies, especially on normal tide, but low tide is still very generous. On the other hand, high tide Glowflies are probably the worst of all stages. The reason normal and low tide Wahoo World is really good for both of these waves is that it has large open areas with salmonids coming from pretty much the same direction. This allows teams to safely position themselves back and just slowly survive the wave while safely committing themselves to a strategy. It's never been a better time to practice the proper basket strategy for both Glowflies and Grillers if you haven't done it before, as you'll never have this much safe space to do so, and as you probably know by now if you watch my content, splitting the Golden Egg carrying enemies is the most efficient right next to the basket, as it takes almost no time to collect those eggs, and you can also use substrafing to speed up the process by a lot. Substrafing, if you don't know or don't use it yet, is when you go into swimming form while also holding down the R button, as this will completely remove the slowdown effect that you usually get when entering swimming or turning around and swim. So on low tide, the position I recommend is in the back behind the basket, where the moving platform would be usually in PvP, as whether the Glowfly rush wave comes from the left or the right side, they will end up in front of you anyway. But if you stand closer to the basket, they can be out of your vision and you will always have to turn left or right, which is really not ideal. One thing to be careful about here is that if you stand too much to the left or right, the goldies you split will throw their eggs all over the place and fall down into the pits, which is pretty bad as they become almost impossible to collect. So make sure you stand in the middle as much as possible. For normal tide, it's pretty straightforward. Just stand behind the basket on either side with a targeted player in the back and the rest of the team a bit ahead on the sides to clear and weaken the rush wave before they get too close. This way you will split the goldies right next to the basket without any issue and you will have your free eggs. Doing a good rush wave can still net you on a higher EVP ranks a good and steady 60 golden egg round if you do it properly. On both of these tides, so normal and low tide, Driller strategy is roughly the same. There really isn't much of a difference. The target player should stay behind as there's so much space, and the others can get a bit ahead and make sure they shoot the back of the Grillers to stun them. Again, the huge advantage of Wahoo World is that the open space is huge, and you can have a lot of room to shoot and see their backs without them turning, so take advantage of that as much as you can. Apart from that, there isn't really much to say about Griller wave, as the same principles apply to this wave as Glowflies. If you really have to kite them, I mean there's just so much space, that also shouldn't be too bad. Just don't turn around too much as that will punish your team. One thing I'd like to call out that I've been seeing in Executive VP even on 700 level is that please during Glowfly rush wave, do not do this. Do not stand on either of these platforms to splat the wave, but especially not this one where you have the glass panels in front of you, because the egg collection will become completely impossible. I know everyone just wants to help, but this is the worst thing you can do, both to win the wave and also to improve. The further away you split Glowfly goldies, the harder it will become to collect those eggs, and with a glass panel that you can't paint being in the way, it's just atrocious, and no one should ever do this, especially on this map, as it's so good for Glowflies. Keep practicing the proper strategies and you'll get there, but climbing up to these spots is just counterproductive and you're working against yourselves. The only valid reason to even try doing so, but even then it doesn't work, is high tide Glowfly rush wave, which I think is arguably the worst Glowfly rush you can get in Salmon run, and there's just zero room for error to win this round as the space is very small and the rush wave can arrive from any direction. I've only got this wave once so far, but it's fair to say it's brutal, and my only advice right now for it is to stick together, constantly watch for direction change, and pray. Griller waves on high tide are a lot more manageable, thankfully, and it's pretty much the same strategy as low tide. Griller doesn't really change much here, except you have to splat them a bit faster, but the space around the basket is still really good, and you should be fine as long as people go ahead the targeted player and make sure to utilize all the room they have to stun the Grillers in time. But those are my quick tips for Griller and Glowfly waves, everyone. I did not get a lot of them, but I saw so many teams run around all the place when Wahoo World is just really an amazing map for these night waves that I had to make this quick video. Practice holding your ground near the basket and you'll see these waves will become a lot more manageable, and if you need more help, I hope these gameplay footages help to see how it's usually done. Thank you all so much for the incredible support during Big Run. The channel has been seeing a lot of new people. I'm glad if my content helps you have a better time, and come by and say hello later today on the live stream here on YouTube. Until then, take care and bye-bye.